In late October of 2022, law enforcement in Mesa, Arizona, received a call about a possible drunk driver and subsequently stopped 23-year-old Clare Margaret Meacham while she was taken in for processing. The intoxicated woman told officers that she remembered placing her baby in a crib at her home, but nothing afterwards. She said it was possible the child was home alone. Officers went to Meacham's address and heard a child crying inside. They checked the woman's doorbell camera and found that she'd left the home 2 hours before the baby was discovered. Further investigation indicated that Meacham lived alone, was the only one with access to the home, and that she'd made no efforts to find a babysitter before she went out drinking. The child, who was unharmed, was placed with the Department of Child Safety, while Meacham was arrested for DUI and child abuse. Number 7. Tanya. On December the 21st of 2014, Australian woman Ina Mills posted an ad on Gumtree for the sale of her antique diamond ruby ring. The woman's young son, Rocky, had been born with brain damage and cerebral palsy. Mills and her husband were desperate to raise money for him to continue receiving stem cell treatment in India. A woman only identified as Tanya contacted Mills on Australia Day and expressed interest in the ring. The handmade piece was a gift from an aunt and had been valued at $9,000, but Mills was selling it for $7,000. She invited Tanya to her home in Newport, northern Sydney, in late January of 2015. The woman tried on the ring and agreed to buy it. She made a transfer from her bank account while at the home and showed Mills the receipt. The latter thanked Tanya for helping her family, revealing the difficulties that they'd faced for the past 19 months. Tanya also met Rocky and his older sister Ruby. She told the family that their son was going to get better before leaving with the ring. 3 days later, however, the funds still hadn't been transferred, and Mills found that Tanya's phone was disconnected. When she attempted to contact her, it became clear to Mills that the woman had presented her with a fake receipt. The mother of two later told a media outlet, "I just don't know how that woman could have seen the state of Rocky and walked out of our home with the ring." Days later, Tanya was arrested in Liverpool, southwest Sydney, and charged with 3 counts of obtaining benefit by deception. She was subsequently granted bail, but as she was leaving the station, a man reporting fraud on a separate matter recognized her as a suspect. Tanya was rearrested near the station as the police dealt with the fresh allegations. News of the despicable ring theft spread and the community banded together, raising over $11,000 to help Rocky with his treatment. Immediate updates indicated that the ring wasn't recovered. Number 6. Lu Tan Nam. Vietnam man Lu Tan Hoi from the northern Thanh Hoa province received anonymous text on September the 10th of 2024 from someone claiming to have stolen his dead father's remains. The sender asked for over $200,000 for their return and warned against calling the police, threatening to permanently dispose of them. In Vietnamese tradition, disturbing the grave is believed to cause unrest to the deceased's soul, with possible consequences for the living. Hoi, whose father had died 4 years prior, initially reacted in disbelief. Upon checking the grave, however, he discovered that it had been dug up and that there was a hole in the coffin cap. The dead man's skull and other bones had indeed been taken. The authorities were contacted and within days found that the culprit was Hoi's cousin, 37-year-old Lu Tan Nam. The man was arrested and confessed to stealing his uncle's remains and hiding them in a rubbish pile near the grave. He cited exorbitant gambling debts as motivation for his actions. The bones were recovered while Nam was arrested for grave desecration and extortion. Number 5. Yang. When she was 3 months pregnant, a Chinese woman, only identified by her surname as Yang, suffered a miscarriage. Fearing that her family would somehow blame her for the loss, she decided to pretend that she was still pregnant. Her due date drew close, and in December of 2019, she met a woman by the name of Liu while undergoing an examination at a hospital in the city of Tongren in Guiyang province. Liu had recently given birth to a baby girl. Yang befriended her and went to visit her home on December the 21st, claiming that she wanted to rent a room from her. Yang told Liu that her phone battery was running low and asked to spend a few hours at the residence in order to charge it. After Liu fell asleep, Yang snatched her child and left the home. Surveillance cameras caught her hurriedly walking down the street in Wanshan district with the child in a bag. Upon reaching her own home, Yang called her parents and said that she'd just given birth. By then, Liu had contacted the police to report her baby missing. Officers went to Yang's residence and found her in bed with the 5-day-old, who was unharmed. It was only then that the family realized she'd lied to them. The baby was reunited with her mother while Yang was arrested for child abduction. Number 4. Nick King. 38-year-old Englishman Nick King was jailed for 6 years and 4 months in November of 2019, after previously admitting to 3 counts of theft and 1 count of fraud by false representation. King was a financial advisor and ran his own business called DNK Wealth Management. Multiple members of his family had trusted him with money to invest on their behalf. King's grandmother had given him her savings amounting to £140,000 and £280,000, and he set up bonds which appeared to be performing well. After the woman sold her Sheffield home in 2010, she gave King an additional £370,000 from the sale. HM Revenue and Customs eventually contacted the family's legal representative to inquire about the bonds, as they suspected the family was trying to conceal money for tax purposes. None of them had suspected King of wrongdoing up to that point, as he'd produced documentation, later proven to be fraudulent, as proof that the investments were doing well. However, upon being contacted by tax authorities, the family reviewed the various stories that King had given them regarding his activity. In September of 2017, his mother contacted him to clarify the matter. King told her, "Mum, you're not going to like this, but I've spent the money and never invested the money from the sale of Granny's house." The man revealed that he had also spent money from the previous 2 bonds. King additionally squandered £20,000 of his mother's inheritance from his grandfather and £10,000 from the savings of his brother, a former Royal Marine. The con man had been lying to his family for years and using their money, amounting to over £600,000, to live lavishly. He bought designer clothing, luxury cars, and went on various exotic holidays. King took a trip to attend the Ryder Cup in the US and often went to an exclusive shooting range in North Yorkshire. His fraud left loved ones torn apart, and they reportedly struggled to accept that they've been deceived. Stealing his family members' money in this way was the ultimate betrayal, said financial crime detective Constable Paul Douglas, who was part of the team that caught King. Number 3. David Checkley. In January of 2000, British comedian Mark Levy, who'd once hosted Channel 4's Big Breakfast program, met a man by the name of David Checkley at an industrial unit in West London. Checkley, who was at the time in his mid-50s, had told Levy that he had 12 Rolex watches to sell for £45,000. Unbeknownst to Levy, the man worked for drug lord Patrick Smith, who was looking to settle a score with the former TV host regarding an alleged £40,000 debt from a cigarette smuggling operation. Checkley used the promise of the Rolex deal to lure Levy to the meetup, where Smith's gang ambushed him. He was tortured, placed in the trunk of a Mercedes, and driven to farmland in Buckinghamshire, where he was executed. Levy's body was never found, but the murder plot was discovered, leading to the arrest and conviction of those involved. Smith and an accomplice were handed life sentences, while Checkley was given a 5-year sentence for false imprisonment and conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm. Following his release, Checkley resumed his criminal activity. In 2010, he ran a scam on various women he dated by convincing them he suffered from a terminal illness and needed money for treatment. His ill-gotten gains rose to roughly £500,000 before he was discovered and sent back behind bars for 6 years. In spite of spending years in prison, the prolific con man wouldn't relent. From February of 2017 to February of 2021, he used the dating app Plenty of Fish to target women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who were lonely, recently broken up, or looking for a serious relationship. Checkley tricked his victims into believing he was an intelligent, knowledgeable, and powerful man. He presented himself as an architect, Vietnam War veteran, or a US fighter pilot, and invented complex backstories complete with fake wives that were billionaires or heiresses. Checkley tricked at least 10 women into sending him money under various false pretenses, such as financial emergencies or lucrative business opportunities. The con man was able to maintain multiple relationships by pretending he had to travel for work, and his longest relationship lasted for over 4 years. One of the victims, Lise Johansson, lost everything and became homeless due to Checkley's hold on her. The internet Romeo was discovered after some of his victims became suspicious and went to the police. Checkley was arrested as he returned from a holiday to Ibiza in July of 2021. By then, the money his deception had earned him amounted to £111,000. When the police searched his home in Harrow, London, they found a Mini Cooper, 3 Mercedes vehicles, Harley-Davidson motorbikes, a receipt in a woman's name for a luxury Rolex, and invoices related to the purchase of expensive jewelry. 65-year-old Checkley was convicted of 19 counts of fraud and 1 count of theft, resulting in a 11-year sentence handed out in the fall of 2023. The sentencing judge described Checkley as a ruthless and professional conman, adding it was offending on a prolific scale. There is not a single element of remorse. Today's topic was requested by Cali Girl living in Nevada 8 and Nikki123BXD. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Richard Wallach. In August of 2017, Englishman Richard Wallach went to a Liverpool medical centre and told staff that his wife Valerie was babbling. Paramedics and fire services went to the couple's home in Toxteth and found a horrific scene. To reach the woman, first responders had to make their way through piles of garbage, rotting food, and human waste. 61-year-old Valerie had a history of osteoporosis, arthritis, obesity, agoraphobia, and depression. She was also suffering from undiagnosed breast cancer, which had spread to her brain, ribs, and spine. The woman was slowly dying, and for months, her husband had simply abandoned her in a leather chair in their home. Valerie seemed unresponsive until the emergency workers pulled her from the chair. She screamed in agony as blood, skin, and bodily fluids were left behind in the seat. Valerie was covered in her own waste as well as severe pressure sores which had been festering for so long that they developed maggots. Her blackened teeth were decayed to the point that she couldn't speak. First responders described the smell in the house as unbearable and reported that they'd never seen a human being living in such conditions. When Richard, who'd received a carer's allowance due to Valerie's infirmity, was told that his wife would likely die, he reportedly replied, "Thanks for letting me know, but who is going to sort out my problem? I have been constipated for weeks." It took staff at Royal Liverpool Hospital 90 minutes to clean Valerie, and she died 19 days later on September the 12th of 2017 from multiple organ failure. Richard was arrested for causing his wife's death by negligence, but he denied the charge and went to trial. He claimed that he was unaware of the severity of Valerie's condition, adding that he assumed she was all right because she'd never said otherwise. When shown photos of her injuries, Richard admitted that they were very bad, but said he must have had a mental lapse as he didn't recall seeing them before. Aside from a hoarding disorder, medics found that Richard didn't suffer from other forms of mental illness. He'd simply ignored Valerie and prioritized his own much less urgent needs and wants. In September of 2019, it took a jury less than 3 hours of deliberation to find him guilty of gross neglect manslaughter. In passing a sentence of 8 years, the judge at Liverpool Crown Court told the man, "You are self-obsessed, by which I mean you are excessively preoccupied with your own life and circumstances and think only about yourself." Stick around after number 1 if you have not yet seen our release about when being a first responder turns disastrous. It's an interesting one. Number 1. Grant Amato. In June of 2018, Florida man Grant Amato was fired from his job at the Advent Health Orlando, where he worked as a nurse, following suspicions that he'd stolen multiple vials of the sedative propofol. There was evidence that the man had improperly used the drug on patients under his watch. He was arrested for grand larceny, but the charges were ultimately dropped. Grant had trouble finding work in the aftermath and convinced his parents, Margaret and Chad, to help him become a Twitch streamer. His family paid for his equipment and setup, but instead of pursuing a new career, Grant used most of his time browsing adult websites, such as My Free Cams. It was there that he eventually came upon Bulgarian model Sylvia Venceslavova, who went by Sylvie or Addie Sweet. Grant became obsessed with her. He spent hours every night with Sylvia on the website and paid a fortune for her time. He also sent her gifts in the form of lingerie and adult toys, which she would use while they interacted. Grant, who was at the time in his late 20s, lied to Sylvia. He was a successful streamer. In reality, to lavish her, he was stealing credit cards belonging to his parents and his brother Cody, or borrowing money claiming it was for his streaming career. Within a few months, Grant had spent over $200,000 of his family's money on Sylvia. He was eventually discovered, leading to fights and tension in the household. Grant's parents and his brother nevertheless still sought to help him and paid $15,000 for him to receive treatment for internet addiction at a rehabilitation facility in Fort Lauderdale. The program was supposed to last 60 days, but after staying at the facility from December the 22nd of 2018 to January the 4th of 2019, Grant opted to leave and his family took him back. Upon his return to the Chuluta home they shared, a zero-tolerance policy was instilled in the household. Grant was to get a job, support himself, and have no contact with Sylvia. He initially agreed, but since he believed that the model was his girlfriend, soon felt that the rules were unfair as they prevented him from being with her. He had also reportedly come to suspect that his brother and father had talked to Sylvia while he was in rehab and told the model to stay away from him and that he wasn't who he'd claimed to be. Grant eventually convinced Margaret to give him her phone so that he could talk to the model. When Chad found out, he told Grant to pack up his things and leave the home. A few hours later on that day, January the 24th of 2019, Grant armed himself with an IWI Jericho 941 pistol. While his mother was on the computer in the family office, he shot her in the back of the head, killing her. Grant waited for his father to return home and executed him via headshot in the family's kitchen. Using Chad's phone, he tricked Cody into coming home after his nursing shift. Grant was particularly close to his brother. They'd gone to the same high school, shared an interest in weightlifting, had both attended nursing school, and they had recently visited Japan together. Grant, nevertheless, lured his brother to the home and killed him in cold blood. After the triple murder, Grant used his dead father's fingerprint to unlock his phone and link his own account to his banking app. Since he'd been kicked off the home's Wi-Fi, he used a Publix login to speak to Sylvia, and evidence indicated that he'd planned to go to Bulgaria to meet her before leaving the home. Grant set the scene to make it look like Cody had been responsible for the killings. The bodies were discovered the following morning after Cody didn't show up for work and his colleagues asked the authorities to perform a welfare check. Grant became the primary suspect and he was tracked down to a DoubleTree hotel. During questioning, he offered different stories about his whereabouts at the time of his family's death. After the authorities showed him photos of the lifeless victims, Grant reportedly said, "My family has been blaming me for months for ruining their lives, stealing and not following the rules of the home, so I might as well be blamed for this too." He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. In spite of pleas for a confession from his older half-brother, Jason, Grant was unwavering in his claims of innocence throughout the legal proceedings. He went to trial and prosecutors sought the death penalty while his public defender argued on the basis of Cody being the culprit. Jason took the stand and testified against his half-brother, but even though he believed that Grant had killed their mother, told the court that he still loved him. On August the 12th of 2019, Grant was found guilty of triple murder, but the jury didn't unanimously agree on the death penalty. Grant was handed 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In the case's aftermath, his lawyer told the media, "I've never been around a defendant with such a lack of emotion," noting that even after narrowly dodging the death penalty, he was void of any reaction. Shortly before 11 p.m. on June the 2nd of 2023, authorities in West Virginia apprehended Timothy D. Kennedy in the Beach Creek area of Mingo County. The 29-year-old's arrest marked the culmination of a massive manhunt that had been launched at about 2 p.m. that afternoon. Kennedy had reportedly been wanted in connection with the shooting death of a West Virginia state trooper by the name of Corey Maynard. The latter, along with 2 other troopers, had responded to reports of a shooting in the 4200 block of Beach Creek Drive. Upon arrival at the scene, the law enforcement officers were inundated with shots fired by the suspect. Sergeant Maynard was gunned down, and Kennedy managed to escape, sparking an extensive police operation that came to involve upwards of 100 officers from the area, as well as a West Virginia State Police helicopter. The initial shooting, to which Maynard and his colleagues had been responding, left 39-year-old Benjamin Adam Baldwin in critical condition. He was brought to CAMC General Hospital, whereupon doctors successfully stabilized him. The police ultimately caught up with Kennedy after he was spotted speeding in a stolen vehicle near a command post that had been set up as part of the effort to catch him. Following his arrest, he was charged with first-degree murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. Number 6. Nicholas Rainier, Eric Hill, and Matt Dawson. On the morning of January the 11th of 2020, a single vehicle crash along I-27 in Lubbock, Texas, drew multiple first responders to the scene, including police and firefighters. The motorists involved had reportedly been traveling southbound when they lost control of the vehicle, which overturned and came to a rest in the northbound lanes. While authorities were cleaning up the accident, a second vehicle traveling southbound crossed over the median and crashed about 25 meters away from the scene of the initial wreck. As Lubbock first responders worked to resolve both accidents, a third crash unfolded in the same area. A southbound vehicle crossed over the highway median and struck a pair of firefighters, as well as a police officer. The car continued down the roadway before descending into an embankment. One of the firefighters who was struck, later identified as Lubbock Fire Rescue Paramedic Eric Hill, was rushed to the hospital, but his injuries ultimately proved fatal. The 39-year-old had reportedly been with the department for 10 years and had been promoted to the rank of lieutenant less than a year before his death. The police officer involved in the collision was named as Nicholas Rainier, aged 27. He'd only been on the force for a year prior to the incident, which left his wife Christina widowed and their baby daughter fatherless after he too succumbed to his injuries. The other firefighter who was hit was identified as 30-year-old Matt Dawson. The crash reportedly left him in critical condition in the immediate aftermath. Although he ultimately survived the ordeal, the severe injuries he sustained had lasting effects, leaving him physically unable to provide for his family. In May of 2023, Dawson testified before the Texas Senate Committee on Business and Commerce in support of the so-called Matt Dawson Act. The legislation was drafted for the purpose of giving injured first responders in Texas lifetime income benefits. During a press conference held in the wake of the 3 I-27 crashes, authorities blamed poor road conditions brought on by inclement weather for the string of accidents. Number 5. Joshua Zaborowski. 30-year-old Joshua Zaborowski, an EMT from Angelina County, Texas, was transporting a patient from Jasper County to Lufkin for Allegiance Mobile Health during the early hours of December the 23rd of 2021. As the ambulance was traveling north along US Highway 69, Zaborowski suddenly veered into the southbound lanes and crashed into an oncoming SUV. The emergency vehicle briefly continued down the road before overturning. Upon the arrival of other first responders, a passenger in the ambulance, the patient on board, and the driver of the SUV were all taken to a Lufkin hospital. Meanwhile, Zaborowski was pronounced dead at the scene at about 1 a.m. The most readily available updates on the matter seem to suggest that investigators were still trying to ascertain the reason for the tragic incident. Number 4. Allison Russo Elling. Lieutenant Allison Russo Elling, a veteran of the New York City Fire Department, stopped to get some food in Astoria during her lunch break on the afternoon of September the 29th of 2022. While wearing clothes that clearly indicated that she was a member of the FDNY, Russo Elling was suddenly attacked by a man brandishing a knife. 34-year-old Peter Zizopoulos slammed the first responder to the ground, mounted her, and stabbed her multiple times before fleeing the scene. Upon being rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens, 61-year-old Russo Elling was pronounced dead. The suspect was tracked down shortly after barricading himself inside his apartment, located near the scene of the crime. He was arrested on charges of murder and criminal possession of a weapon. In the incident's aftermath, the acting FDNY commissioner called the attack barbaric and completely unprovoked. At the time of her murder, Russo Elling had been mere months from retirement after 25 years of service. She'd reportedly been one of the first responders at ground zero of the 9/11 attacks, and according to colleagues, had dedicated her life to saving others. Following his arrest, Zizopoulos was held at the Bellevue Hospital psych ward for a mental evaluation. His lawyer claimed he had a psychiatric history dating back to 2018, which explained his reasoning for pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. Conversely, the president of the Uniformed EMS Officers Union claimed that the suspect was playing this mental defect issue to prolong justice being provided. Number 3. Augusto Orgi Acabao and Wayne Beer Brooks Jr. At about 9:30 p.m. on July the 5th of 2023, Port Authority police and firefighters were dispatched to the scene of a cargo ship fire at Port Newark in New Jersey. According to a statement later made by the mayor of Newark, several vehicles caught fire aboard a ship docked at the port. Eventually, a pair of firefighters became trapped within the blaze, triggering mutual aid responses from fire departments in Essex, Bergen, and Union counties. Despite the efforts of fellow first responders, 45-year-old Augusto Orgi Acabao and Wayne Beer Brooks Jr., aged 40, were killed. 3 firefighters from Newark and 2 from Elizabeth were also injured as a result of the intense inferno. By the following afternoon, the fire was still raging. Explosions and heavy flames could reportedly be heard and seen near the stern of the ship. The National Transportation Safety Board announced its plans to closely investigate the cause of the deadly incident. Number 2. Annie McPhee. Annie McPhee, a Canadian paramedic of more than 30 years, was on her way to work on the morning of June the 18th of 2022. As she traveled along Route 3 in Somerville, Prince Edward's Island, 52-year-old McPhee began to drift over the center line. She consequently smashed into an oncoming commercial pumper truck. Although the driver behind the wheel of the truck was uninjured, McPhee ultimately lost her life as a result of the crash. News of her death was met with an overwhelming outpouring of support from the community. The veteran first responder was described as a legend in EMS and had reportedly served as the vice president of the Paramedics Union. She'd recently received a medal from the lieutenant governor for her decades of service. and had also been a member of the Crawford Volunteer Fire Department for over a decade. In the wake of her tragic passing, her firefighter colleagues posted a social media tribute in which they highlighted her wisdom, humor, fierce loyalty, and knowledge. They punctuated the post with a heartfelt salute saying, "Rest easy, sister. We will take it from here." Number 1. Donald Jones. Late on the night of March the 19th of 2012, a woman named Thelma Allen drove off the road and struck a gas main on the north side of Old Jacksonville Highway in Jacksonville, Arkansas. Allen called her son Bryce, who came on the scene after first responders had already blocked off part of the roadway. Police and firefighters were waiting for crews from Centerpoint Energy to cap the gas leak when Bryce arrived. The latter reportedly swerved around the emergency vehicles and intentionally changed directions, aiming his car directly at veteran Jacksonville firefighter Captain Donald Jones, firefighter Jason Bowmaster, and police officer Daniel DiMatteo. Bryce subsequently accelerated and struck the 3 first responders at a high rate of speed, severely injuring each of them. Officer DiMatteo managed to radio his colleagues to inform them of the second crash, drawing more emergency responders to the scene. Bryce eventually stepped out of his van and was promptly taken into custody. Bowmaster and DiMatteo were rushed to the hospital where they both underwent emergency surgery. Subsequent reports indicated that the 2 men were in critical but stable condition. Meanwhile, Captain Jones's injuries proved too severe and he was ultimately pronounced dead. Consequently, Bryce faced the charge of second-degree murder, in addition to 2 counts of criminal attempt to commit second-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty to each of the charges levied against him. Prior to the case being brought to trial, a judge ordered a mental health evaluation for the 47-year-old, who suffered from bipolar disorder and paranoia. The matter was ultimately brought to the courtroom where multiple witnesses took the stand. One of the prosecution's key witnesses was a police officer from Columbus, Ohio, whom Bryce had allegedly struck with a car outside a hospital during an unrelated incident. The officer wasn't seriously injured, but his testimony helped prosecutors illustrate Bryce's reckless actions as being part of a disturbing pattern of violence against first responders. In the end, the man was found guilty and given the maximum sentence of 70 years in prison. The Arkansas State Court of Appeals upheld the conviction in June of 2015. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be the permanent leader of a small country or own an island? Let us know in the comment section below.